Okay, I think we're good to go then. All right, so we're going to be talking about the new Vamos QA process, which is changing because typically at the end of the sprint, I would be going through the critical path, which is all of the essential functions of the application. But with my departure, we're going to be transferring that responsibility to the entire dev team. So we're going to be talking about that specific QA process today. Before we get into the details of that, I wanted to start with just an overview of what all of QA is on this project, because it's important to remember that the critical path QA is one part of the QA process. It's basically the last stop before any code that we write gets pushed into production. So much earlier in the process, we have this concept of shift left testing, which means that we want to be testing code as early as possible and pretty often throughout the development process. So that takes the form of the unit tests that you're writing whenever you're writing a code for a ticket. We have test coverage tickets that specifically deal with getting good coverage, so our code is well tested. We have peer code reviews and acceptance testing, which means looking at the code and making sure it's in good condition and that everything is working, and senior code reviews for the same purpose, to make sure that we have a really high quality at every step of the process. And later in the process, we get to sprint QA, and we might get bug reports and tickets from clients. So those are things that are right before we deploy code, or even after we deploy code. We might have QA checks where a customer or a client finds an issue, or we find something in sprint QA that we have to scramble to fix. So those things are much harder to fix, and you have to work much more quickly to get them done. So we want to put an emphasis on these other types of testing. But today we're going to be primarily talking about the end of sprint QA. So you guys all know about peer reviews on your PRs, but I just wanted to mention this because this is a really important part of the whole overview of the process that sets you up so that you're not finding huge issues when you get to that last stop, critical path QA. So we want to be finding issues in PR reviews, giving good feedback, and getting things fixed earlier in the process. So definitely want everybody to think of that shift left testing methodology. But when we do get to the end of our sprint, we have our critical path QA. And the critical path means testing all of the functionality that is critical. So if we all know how Vamos works, but this is things like creating a site, editing a site, using the map, using the search features, creating visits, creating notes, editing those things. That's all on the web app, maybe doing imports. These are all the things that our customers need to do in Vamos every single day. And if any one of them breaks, Vamos is really not useful to them. Like basically, you may as well have broken the entire app. So we want to find all of these issues before we push any code to production. So like I said, critical path QA is basically the last stop before that code makes it out into the wild and our customer runs the risk of finding an issue. So we want to find those issues early. So the process, as you all know, we work in 2-week sprints. And at the end of that sprint, the last Friday of the sprint is when all of our code that is considered done for the sprint should have gone through the peer review, the senior review, and it's merged into the dev branch, I believe. And then from there, Cruz will cut the release branch, or Andrea, if this is the mobile app. I'm primarily going to talk through the web app today because that's the example we're going to look at, but the steps are essentially the same for the mobile app as well. You're just doing your testing on your mobile device. So at the end of the sprint, the team lead would deploy the release branch to a staging environment. And I have a couple things in red here because this is a new process, and I think there's a couple things that we want to clarify. So I wasn't sure if we were going to be using the Vamos staging site specifically or a review app. Because we do get review apps for each PR. So I think it would be reasonable to use either one of those environments. And you guys can kind of figure that out as you go along. But essentially the release branch has all of these changes that we just saw in our sprint demo included in it, and it gets deployed to a staging site where you can actually functionally interact with them and test them. On that last Friday of the sprint, we'll have 2 developers identified who will work in pairs to run through a critical path QA script. So that means that there's a very long list of items that have been written out for you, and you'll just go down the list and test each one. After you test it, if it's working and everything looks good to go, you just check it off on the list. If you find an issue with it, like the thing is not working, you can't create a site, You can't pull up the edit site form, things like that. Do not check it off, and you make a note. There's a space next to that checkbox, and we'll go through that script in a minute. So you just make a note of what it was that was broken. It could be that the thing wasn't working, or it could just be something looks weird. I think this is supposed to work a different way, but I'm not really sure. This element isn't rendering, or it's over here on the other side of the page when I think it should be centered, or little things like that. So you want to make note of every potential issue that you identify throughout the QA run. After you go through all of those items and you've taken notes in your QA script about every item that you either didn't pass or you found some other issue with, you will go back to the JIRA backlog and say, okay, so I found all these issues. Do we already have tickets for some of them? Because maybe we've already found out that the search button isn't where it's supposed to be, and we already have a ticket for it. So you don't want to waste your time, going through and making a new ticket for that. So you want to do some searches in the JIRA backlog to see if a ticket already exists for that item, and maybe make a note of that back on your script sheet where you took notes and say, we already have a ticket for this. If there isn't a ticket for the item and you found an issue that you think we need to work on, whether we need to fix it right away or whether we can just get to it when we get to it, you want to add a ticket for that. So that's another item I have in red. I wanted to clarify with you, Cruz, primarily. Do you want the developers who are in these pairs to be writing those tickets, or do you want them to give you a list and have you write the tickets?
I think it makes sense to have them at least start the ticket and mention it in the review that they leave on the release branch for web.
Okay, great. So I'll update that whenever I get changes so that you guys have that in this breakdown in the slide deck. So you would add the ticket. It doesn't have to be perfect with all of the information that we might need, but you'll add a ticket if it's needed, and then you'll send that to Cruz in a form that we'll talk about in a second so that he can take a look at it and see what else is needed. So when you do write a ticket, you want to be descriptive, you want to be thorough, use the template that we have in the ticket description to say what the problem is, what the goal is, any background, maybe add a screenshot or a screen recording if you have one so that someone can see where it happened and what happened. Include the date that it's in the staging environment. So all that information that you would want as a developer when you might take this ticket later so that you know what to work on. From there, once you have your tickets, you know what all the issues were that you found in the release branch, you're going to go to the actual release branch PR and you're going to write a review. Just like you would do a peer review on another developer's PR, you're going to start a review and make a comment that lists out all of the issues that were found. And you want to make a note of what the issue was, as Cruz said, link to the JIRA ticket so that we can see or so that that we have a record of what ticket corresponds to which issue. And you want to note things that you think we really might need to fix before we deploy, because that's ultimately the point of running through the critical path like this. If you find an issue that you think is critical, you want to put that in the top and say, these are the issues that I think need to be fixed before this branch can be deployed, before we can put this out into the world. And then you can have a section below that that says, these are the issues that we need to fix, but they're not super critical. We can still deploy this and we'll get to these and we'll fix them at some point in the future. And you might have some that you're really not sure about. So you can also include a section that says, I don't know what we need to do about this. It looks weird, but we need to do some more research to figure that out. The last question that I have here on this slide is, what is the deadline for posting that list of issues? I think that it would be ideally by the end of the day Friday, but I also think that we may have people working across time zones. Is that 5 p.m. Eastern on Friday? Or would we be okay if they need to come back to it Monday morning and just have it done by sprint planning when we would probably be assigning those tickets?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, ideally by the end of the day Friday, which would mean that we would want the release branch created by Thursday. And I think that's a okay thing that we can try to, like, pattern that we can try to do and see, does this work, does it not work, and we can move it from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think this process, like all processes, will probably have to be adjusted over time and see how it goes for people. So before I move on, are there any questions about this? And just know that the next thing we're going to do is actually look at the script that I've been talking about and these different areas that you would actually be using and the tools you're going to be using to do this. But are there any questions about the general process so far? All right. So we're going to do a walkthrough, and just to reiterate, we basically the flow is going to be, if you are the person who's assigned for QA for this sprint, you're going to get a notification from the team lead that the release branch is ready for QA, and they'll tell you where you can go to get it. So here we see the message that Cruz sent yesterday, release branch PR is ready. You can click on the link or go to the API repo or the R-Sites native repo and see the actual release branch with the change log. You're going to make sure that you can access it on staging or a review app. You want to add yourself as a reviewer on the PR if you're not there already, so that you can actually click the little add review button. And then you're going to meet up with your partner to run through the QA script. You can maybe have one person test while the other person takes notes, and you'll just go through all those items together, check things off if they're good, take notes and note any issues that you find, and then go back to the PR, leave your review, and list out all the issues after you've added tickets or seen if there are tickets already in Jira. So with that, let's take a look at the QA script. So as you saw, we got the message yesterday in the Vamos channel that the release branch was ready. We come to our QA script, and you can see down here that we have different tabs for different things. So there's a desktop, April 2022 onward. So this is the tab that you'll be using anytime you are doing a QA run on the desktop, on the web app. There's another tab for mobile. So this is the tab you'd use if you're doing a mobile QA run anytime from now onward. A couple other tabs I want to mention. There are several archived ones that are previous QA runs that I've done. Those are just if you want to look back at any results or see how notes have been written, or see if an issue was found at a different time. You can search through those tabs if you'd like. So those are just there for reference if you want them. And then this is just an FYI. This is a list of things that you can look for when you're doing visual QA, usability or accessibility testing, and functional testing. So you do not have to use this tab every time. It's just a reference if you're interested in QA and you want to make sure that you're thinking of all the potential things you could look for. If you want to take a look at this, it's a good reference guide. So in our desktop example, if we're doing a QA run for the web app, we would come to our script here, and you can see Yancey and I went through this yesterday. So we met yesterday afternoon. We put the name of the sprint and the date and our names here so that we know who did what, because this is going to live on for a long time and we'll have this, for a while. We went through the script. So the first item is open the web app, log in, attempt to log in with invalid credentials, make sure that you can't log in if you don't have the right credentials, log in with valid credentials, make sure that you can get into the app. So as we're doing this, one person should be reading these and taking notes and checking the item off, and the other person will have the Vamos staging site open, and they will be walking through all these steps. So the next item is verify expected landing on the site's index page, card view. So we saw on the other tab that that's where we landed. You want to verify that you can see the site's index, the search elements, the buttons for create site or new site and create from group. So we would check that off if it's done. Then next we would switch to the map view. And we would verify that the search is here. See all the search controls that we want to see. It looks like all the sites are here and present on the sites map. We'd go to the table view, verify that the columns that we expect are there, that sites are coming up on that view, that we can still search for sites through that view. So this is why it's helpful to have one person on one tab taking notes and one person on the actual site doing the testing. So you would go down this list and there's basically an item for every possible critical thing that you could need to do in Vamos. And they're split up into sections that correspond to the navigation tab. Sorry, wrong tab. So we're going to start on the site's index. You will create a site. You'll start working with that site to create visits, create notes, edit notes, delete those objects, add photos, just checking all the things that you might want to do with the site. Next up, you'd go to the contacts tab. You would create a contact, search for contacts, all those things that you do with contacts. Same with groups, same with visits. You check that all the exports download. And then same with the admin tools. You don't really have to do much with users and editing account, but just checking that custom fields are loading and you can create a new custom field that you're able to import as well. So that's the last thing, last document that you need to be aware of. There's a test sheet for the importer. So you'll just delete the site that's already on here and maybe add one that says test import for Sprint 35 for the next one. Add some dummy data just like you would if you're creating a test site, and then go back to the app and try to import it through the importer. So all of these steps are outlined in a lot of detail on this sheet here. As the app changes over time, as a team, you will probably need to update these. So for example, once routes is included, there will need to be items added for the routes feature. And I can start that, but you guys will need to kind of evolve this over time to match what the app can do and how you expect it to behave. Then when you get all the way down to the bottom, you can see it's a pretty long list, but a lot of them will be quick and some of them you might need to spend more time on. But once you work through all of these items, you'll get to the bottom here. And what I recommend doing is adding the change log. So you can find that in the release PR. You just copy in this list of items, put it in the column underneath the one that you're working in, and then you can add some checkboxes just to make sure that everything that you plan to include that's new in the release is actually in the release. And that's really helpful for when Lori has to draft release notes, so that she knows that, yes, the filter by worker presence is going to be included. The new search item for filtering by visited in a season, that's going to be included. So those things help to just make sure that we're deploying what we expect to deploy and that those things are actually working once everything is all put together. Okay, so that's been a lot of information. I think the last step that we've already been through is once you're done with this, one thing I did forget to mention is these highlight colors. So there's a key here. This is just a helpful visual tool if you want to use it, that you can highlight the field in yellow if a ticket is needed, but it doesn't really need to be prioritized right now. Red means a ticket's needed and we really need to fix it before we deploy this. And then orange means we need to discuss this and figure out what to do next. So that can help you as you're going when you get to the end of this and you need to go back and create tickets or see if there's already tickets created, and then write your comment on the PR. And so you can see this is the one that I wrote this morning from the QA run we did yesterday. No issues blocking deployment. 4 issues found that need tickets, but we can work on them later. And then 1 issue found that we had already been working on, but I found it in a new place. So this is where you just list out each of those items and link to the JIRA issue so that Cruz or Andrea, whoever the team lead is for web or mobile, can take a look at that and kind of prioritize that work and see where we need to fit it into the backlog lineup. And once you do that, you're finished with the QA run. You can let your team lead know that you're done, and then they can take a look at those tickets. So again, that was mainly for the web app, but the mobile app process is essentially the same. For that, it's only a little bit different because you have to actually use your phone to do it. But Andrea will be adding everybody, depending on whether you have an iPhone or an Android phone, you'll be added to the appropriate test environment for Vamos. And then once the staging release comes out, you'll just be able to pull that up on your phone and test it just like any other app on your phone. You'll be able to use it there. And you'll just go through the mobile QA script. All right, that was a lot of information, but hopefully it's fairly straightforward and the process is pretty well documented. But what questions do people have at this point?
Yeah, I have a question, Lauren.
Yeah.
So, who updates and when will this script be updated if something changes in the future?
Yeah, I think that that'll need to be a team effort because there will be 2 developers each week working on it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if there's a new change and something needs to be updated in the script, I think that the people who are doing the QA run at that time who
Mm-hmm.
identify it can change it and maybe just let the team know, hey, I updated this item on the QA script, just so you all know for next time
Okay.
if something has changed. Yeah. For really significant changes, I think team leads will probably need to be involved just to make sure that we're testing things that that are important to test. As an
Okay.
example, Yancey pointed out yesterday that I didn't have things for deleting visits and notes, so I just added
Mm-hmm.
those. So it's definitely a team effort to make sure that you're catching everything.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Mhm. All right, pulse check. Give me a reaction. Give me a thumbs up if this made sense and you're feeling okay about it. Cruz is giving a shocked face. Nicole and Sinan are okay. People are looking okay. All right, give me some other emoji if you're like, oh my God, I'm really overwhelmed and I don't understand. This is scary. I'm assuming that the ta-da, I don't know if that means you're scared. Okay, I'm gonna assume that things are okay. We will have to work out the kinks, and by we, I mean you all will have to work out the kinks as you go. It takes a little bit, the first time it'll take longer. The second or third time that you go through this, it'll be very straightforward and you'll say, oh yeah, I know what I need to do next. So I think that it'll definitely get better over time. And certainly work as a team to adapt the process to make sure it fits your needs. If there's a process that is kind of clunky or there's delays in the process, that's the kind of thing that you should look at and say, okay, how can we do that a little bit differently? So yeah, that's all I have on QA.
Yeah, and also we're gonna try to pair Yancey up with some other team member for the upcoming sprint QAs. Just so both of the people that have to do that are not lost, and then we'll be learning together and hopefully optimizing this process.
Okay, if any questions come up in the next couple days, please ask them in the Vamos channel and tag me, and then I can answer them there so everyone can see the answer. But otherwise, we'll see how it goes.
Awesome.
All right, I think that's it for today. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.